I get the economic conversation, not the how to improve your sex life conversation. Okay, dude.
We know where. Look, I know who's an expert at what. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the sex life?
I'm just fucking around because I saw your last podcast was with Sarah.
What
I'm
are
down
your
to go
tricks?
wherever, you know what I mean? But,
what are your tricks? All right, we're live everywhere. So, all right, people, we got Amateo here, and let me see. I need to record this. Yeah. All right, we have my friend Amateo here, and we're gonna be talking about the economic impact of what we have going on here, and he's been digging in deep on all sorts of things which I don't even know about. All I know is that Amateo disappeared. I mean, you've always been interested in this subject matter, but you've definitely, I would, from my perspective, the last couple of years, did a deep dive into crypto, into stock, like what's going on economically from like a much bigger picture than what most people are thinking about.
Sure.
And so it's turned into now anytime I have a question, I just run it through Amateo first and then see what happens. And then everyone else in the community is like, yeah, you should ask Amateo about that anytime these subjects come up. So I'm excited. And anytime we podcasted previously, we just had a fucking blast.
Yeah, we sure did.
We laugh. We laugh. Every time we hang out, we just laugh and laugh and laugh. They can find Mike and Alma hanging out.
Hold on.
Oh, we got the dog. That's all right. All right. So give everyone a quick why they should listen and what kind of information you think that you might be able to offer that's going to be new to them.
Cool. I've got doggy daycare over here, so I'm just trying to keep the kids cool before I kick them out in the rainy backyard. So, I mean, first and foremost, I appreciate that intro, my man. I've been going deep in a lot of subject matters, and I'll maybe lay some context as to why. I've always been very fascinated in the startup and economic world. I also came to realize that if I was going to reach my big visions and goals, I needed to do a crash course in what the new economy was going to look like so that I understood what it was going to take to get there and to build what I want to create that. I'm definitely not, I don't have some sort of licensing in economics. I'm not a financial advisor. What I do right now is I'm a senior vice president of marketing for Voyager. Voyager is a crypto broker mobile app. So I'm very involved in the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain, a world for some that feels hot, a world for others that feels like has come and went. It's, it just depends on what your temperature is. The company that I work for was started by a bunch of seasoned executives. Many of them were involved in building and developing E-Trade, which was the digital broker space for legacy markets, right? So, back in the day, when you used to try to trade the stock market, it was a Wolf of Wall Street. You would call someone up and they'd be in a boiler room, like, fucking buy it now, and you're like, okay, like, here, take everything I have, and they're like, sell. So, and then that was it, right? And then all of a sudden, the internet came along and they were like, all right, we can digitize this. We don't have to have all these people in a room. And then sooner or later, it was robots competing with robots, trading the stock market at a speed of which you'll never be able to compete, etc. So I don't know. I just found all of this stuff fascinating. I found it really interesting. I've always had an interest, and why I think people should maybe listen today and pay attention to the conversation is there's a lot of trends going on, and these trends have a big impact on ourselves personally, on ourselves economically. And I think at the end of the day, I'm not an expert. You're not an expert. What we are trying to do is we're just trying to make sense of everything going on. And how do we assess this minutia of data points? Because I think we could talk a little bit about economics. I think we could talk a little bit about conspiracy. There's so much going on right now to make sense of. And so how do you make sense of it? How do you understand where you orient and align and what to believe in all of this? And two, how do you then leverage your decisions to have skin in the game where it matters? Those things are really big elements of how we're needing to navigate what's going on right now.
Yeah, the sense making conversation has been something that you and I have both been in for a while. It's not a common conversation for the average person.
It's not.
You have to to even be in that conversation, you have to be operating from the understanding that as human beings, we're constantly making sense of everything.
Right.
We're making everything mean something to us.
Right. The meaning making machines.
The meaning making machines. There are no data points in which we don't attach some narrative that is tied to our own personal past and experience.
That's right.
Which means that the being able to objectively study data is not a reality. That's not something that it can actually be done. A lot of times people will go, "Oh, I think I'm pretty objective about something, anything." I'm like, that's bullshit. There's no such thing as objectivity, really, unless you've experienced some level of enlightenment where you no longer get attached to any thoughts, right?
Yeah, I mean, every time that you try to make sense of data, you're always falling into the double slit experiment of quantum mechanics, right? Like you're always the observer interpreting the points, trying to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. And your narrative impacts the outcome, and there's just, it's nuts. And so I just like to point that out, and we've been in the conversation of how do we make sense of things, and as a human being, where we tend to just make sense of things. And then there's been a conversation in the community around there's too much data. There's too much data for any single person to make sense of everything. And maybe you can dive deep enough into a single tiny thing, like a scientist. What a scientist does is dive super deep into a single thing and make sense of that. So I've been living life, since entering this conversation, I'd say going on 5-6 years, is going, oh wow, realizing how much I don't know shit. And then in addition to that, now with this pandemic, the amount of controversial information and really the data, in my opinion, is pretty clear. But the narrative, what people make of the data is what is causing so much confusion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the data itself is so skewed, right? Like, not to get political, but Governor Cuomo was doing his thing this morning, and he was talking about the fact that the original CDC projections were like, by right now, a third of the United States would have all contracted COVID, and we'd need enough hospital beds that's equivalent to like the population of New York, or roughly something like that across the country. And that was like empirically wrong. Right? That was like really bad data, right?
Well, they were looking at data, and then they went into the future, which is not data. Right. Like anything that's predictive in nature is being impacted by narrative.
100%. I mean, that's why people are wondering why the stock market is recovering so strong when unemployment rates are skyrocketing, right? What is the stock market other than a speculative future-based bet on what will happen based on what is happening now, right? So it's like
based on what's happened previously,
right? And the decisions of like the Fed, that's making a huge impact on how the stock market is responding. but you're right. It's like the minute that you're extrapolating and reaching into the future for data, you're grasping. But at the same time, without like predictive theories, it, what do we have? Like that, those are so critical to move
Right.
forward. Like every business has to have a predictive understanding of what their growth rates are going to be. Every farmer needs to have an idea of how much, onions or potatoes they're going to sell the next year. Without that, we're really at a loss, And I think we see, at the end of the day, we're always going to find that the bigger the top-down speculative expansion of data is, it's just so open to have holes in it and be wrong,
Yeah.
But like an example about data that's fun, right? I'm a marketer, and there's often this question of like, how do you trust your intuition, right? And people like you and I, we go through life probably trusting our intuition a lot. And our intuition is then verified on the outcome of our reality, right? Like, oh, I think I should message this girl. Oh, that went well. Or I don't think I should do that. And then you like week later, like, oh, dodged a bullet, like
Yeah.
either there's that, there's, oh, I think I should, say yes to that opportunity. Nope, fuck that. I ain't doing it. And it's like, oh, I was right or I was wrong. Data is so interesting because like it will really fuck with your intuition. Because as a marketer, I'll go, I think that subject line is going to perform better. I think the name of that campaign will perform better. I think that feature will be more popular. And then I test it. And I'm wrong all the time.
Yeah.
I'm wrong all the time. And that's because my intuition is really good at handling things that are referenced back to me.
Yeah.
My intuition's not so great at understanding what's going to be the answer for everybody else. And I think that that's something that gets underappreciated, I think people assume that what is intuitively right for them, they can just really easily project as being right for other people because their intuition said so. And as we're trying to make sense with everything going on, it's like, well, my intuition says this. Like, well, your intuition may say this in reference to you, your reality, what's right for your body. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it applies across the board. And I think in real time, we're seeing that those tests happen where people are like, oh, I intuitively think this, and they post it on Facebook, and then it's 100 comment debate on what
Right.
everyone's data and intuition says. Oh, well, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and I think part of sense making is to go, oh, look at all these data points that are either confirmation bias or contrarian, and can I hold all of those and deepen my sense making, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting way to bring about marketing. Like, spot on. I'm one of the more intuitive people I know.
Right.
I run my life. I do a lot of business intuitively.
Sure.
But when it comes to marketing, we have good ideas, and I go, I don't know.
Yeah.
We got to test this. We'll see.
We got
what
to test
happens.
this.
I have no idea what I've done interviews with people. I'll interview
Yeah.
somebody, and I'm like, holy fucking shit, this interview is gonna change the world.
Right.
And it's crickets. And then I'll interview someone where I'm like,
All right.
it's okay, And then everyone's like, that was the best fucking show you've ever done. I go, all right, I don't know anything. I was involved in it. It wasn't
Right.
like I was like testing two different pieces of copy. Like, I was there. I was
Right.
part of the experience. Yeah, that's wild.
It's crazy. We really don't know how things are going to resonate or land with people. And if you think that you can just intuitively decide that, I've got news for you. Test it and see the results.
Yeah,
it's unique.
How do you like to test things? How are you testing things now?
Do a lot of market research. I love surveys. I love asking customers what they want, what they think they want. Often what they think they want is not what they actually want. So that's always interesting, right? So testing, usually we go, here's my assumption. Here's my top assumptions. Let me survey my top assumptions. Let's see what the market says about what they think they want. Then let's start to introduce these things, maybe tease them, maybe discuss them. Let's see what gets traction. Let's get clear on what they actually want. Let's coordinate that with what makes most sense for the business. Let's find that sweet spot. That's one way that we're testing bigger things. Smaller things, it's, you know, building automated communication funnels that we're A/B testing and micro testing a bunch of different things, then iterating them as we apply it to larger and larger segments, right? So we'll take a small pool, we'll introduce an offer or an idea, we'll take another pool, we'll introduce another, the same offer, positioned slightly different, communicated slightly different. How does each one perform? Compete them against each other and move them further and further along until we can apply that initial experiment that we think is going to get us closer to that desired outcome to a larger and larger group.
Yeah. That's gonna be a lot for most people. Like, I get what you're saying.
Didn't mean to blow out the conversation.
I love it, but I'll give like a basic. I'll give like a very simple example from my own personal business life. A year and a half ago, and I didn't go as granular as what you're talking about. I didn't go and like start. I wasn't committed to that one project, but what I've done is I introduced a lot of different projects over the years, and some hit and some, most do not.
Right.
So I did one where, like, as you were talking about this, I was thinking about this, is I have psychedelicperformance.com. And so I teamed up with a friend, Matt Cooper, and we were like, all right, we're going to create an offer page and a lead magnet. We're going to create an offer. And it's a 30-minute video teaching people about how to use, how and why, like from a scientific perspective,
right,
how psychedelics could improve your performance, both physically, mentally, emotionally, all these things. And man, we got a lot of people interested. I mean, people were like wanting to watch the video. There was a lot of action happening, but as soon as we presented anything where participation was required, crickets. And the feedback we got was like, well, most psychedelics are illegal. And I go, oh, so what I found out is the market fucking loves talking about it, right? They want to read about it. They want to consume it. They want to talk about it, but they don't actually want to buy it.
Right.
They're like,
well, they want to buy it, but they don't want to buy help with it. Right.
Yeah. Or no, I had a lot of people say, like, I've never done it. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I had like a lot of people who were curious. I go, oh, or they were afraid to do it, or because there was like there's a dozen reasons why they were scared to do it. Legality being one of them that was easy to point at. And I mean, I even had police officers and stuff like that I was interacting with. They were like, yeah, I want to try this, but I can't, maybe one day when I'm not with the force anymore, I'm going, wow, this is really, I learned a lot in that process. I go, wow, people really love talking about this subject. There's not that many people who are ready to dive into it.
Right.
And so there's probably some type of opportunity we could have created where we would have created some type of course that would have been like, how to get the benefits of psychedelics without doing psychedelics or something like that.
Sure.
And so that would have been a nice little pivot into that.
Right. Because you could have taken that and you could have gone two directions. You could have catered to the evangelists who are all over it and catered to the psychedelic shy. Right. And then, created two things as a result of that.
So that was a test we did. And it was
it's a great test
where it was like, oh, okay. And then that's how it works. And my theory was off. My theory was people were going to like, I want help with this. Like, I got this. I don't know what to do with it. Yada, yada, yada. And just that wasn't the case. That was 2 years ago. It might be different now. You never know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we ran one of those recently where we were testing different crypto features to see what we should build next. And I don't remember exactly what was on the list, but we had quite a few different things. And one of them on the list was crypto interest. And it blew everything out of the water. I knew that it would be popular. I didn't think it would be popular by a long shot. And like I thought it was going to be neck and neck with other features, and then boom, took off. And then we built it really quickly. We introduced it, and man, it's been this enormous market driver for us. And it was one of the great things that people said they wanted, and they actually did. But maybe we steer the conversation a little bit more back to the title. Maybe we get back to, I don't know.
My question, the question that would start coming in, which may be a much better starter question, but we watched the stock market take a pretty big hit. Like you said, it's rebounding. We watched oil fucking take a huge hit. And that's usually predictive of that's a future indicator of housing market. And we're looking at potentially a third quarter housing market dip, which may last a long time. I don't know. What do you think about for a long time, I thought that if the dollar was ever at risk, that people would flood to crypto, but it seems like crypto has been following the same trend as the stock market. And it doesn't look like people are ready to trade in the dollar. Yeah, they're not. Yeah, it's like people aren't ready to trade in the dollar for crypto yet.
Yeah, it's to an extent, right? It's like, from my understanding, when we saw this initial massive sell-off everywhere across all markets, without discretion, it was a lot of big institutions needing to de-risk, right? There's all this risk in all these speculative assets, and they have to go immediately into protection mode. And they're all racing to get the most out of their money that they can because they're panicking, right? So we see this initial de-risk panic across all markets. And then all of a sudden, we start to level off and try to find fair market value again with all of these extenuating circumstances. As far as Bitcoin can be very much considered a commodity, not just a currency, right? It probably performs better as a store of value commodity than it does as a currency. To date, unless there's a bunch of side chain tech that gets built, meaning sort of scalable solutions for Bitcoin, or payment services that are all inclusive in a network, we're not really going to see people buying coffee with Bitcoin, right? As of right now. But what are we seeing, right? If you try to go to a multitude of the popular online vendors for gold and silver, you'll see that quality gold and silver is sold out. You have to get on a wait list. And many of these companies are trying to sell you buffalo nickels and rough, unquality silver bars, right? That just look like you pulled it right off a pirate ship. It's not, you're not getting the Royal Mint these days. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And why? Well, obviously their reserves ran dry because people panic bought commodities. So both institutions and retail, you always got to talk about it, institutions and retail, because there's always the categories, right? You got the big institutions that are de-risking. You also have retail that's de-risking. No surprise that everyone is going to.
Can you give examples of both?
Yeah, institutions would be like hedge funds, VCs that manage a lot of capital, any capital firm, family offices. It could also be the conglomerates that run big corporations, right? That have tons of stock. It can retail being the retail investor, the guy who drives Uber and buys a little Bitcoin on the side, or the person who works in Silicon Valley and has a Robinhood app that he spends a lot of time in, right? Like that's a retail investor, a little bit more of a sophisticated retail investor. They're on Ameritrade every morning, executing some trades, locking in positions, trying to be really sophisticated. But institutions, you're looking at larger sums of money, some of it corporate, some of it, independent funding sources. So initially we saw both institutions and retail de-risk. Makes sense. And the dollar was still the strongest. It's not a surprise, right? I think one thing that is important for us to always recognize is that even though change is happening really fast, we may not see the impact of it immediately, right?
Yeah.
So the institutions de-risk, dollar is still favored, makes sense, right? It's still the number one global
What else
currency.
are we gonna do?
What else are you gonna do? Exactly.
Yeah.
You're gonna hold your airline stocks? I don't think so. I don't think so. Royal Caribbean.
I've got so much. I've got so much credit with Delta right now.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I had some flights booked that just never happened.
Right. Are you gonna rush to invest in small businesses? You're gonna pull out everything you can. Why? Yeah. You're gonna sit on the sidelines hoping to find the economic opportunity. When's the right time to get back in? When's the right time to make a move? Because these kinds of big shifts these are big money opportunities. There's a lot of money lost and there's a lot of money to be gained because we know that the world will never be the same. I keep saying that we're not gonna get back to normal, we're gonna get back to abnormal. We're gonna figure out what getting back to abnormal really means. Right.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a buddy the other day, and I was like, "Oh, this the food supply chain is going to be disrupted." Mm-hmm. And his interpretation of the word disrupted when I said it was that it was going to stop.
Right.
And I said, no. What I mean by disrupted is the people that it's the supply chain, that the way it operates now is going to change.
It's going to change.
There's going to be some people that are completely cut out. There's going to be some new things that pop up. There's going to be, there's all sorts of theories that I could go into on how it's going to be disrupted. Mm-hmm. But his whole thing was like, no way it's going to be disrupted, because he was thinking stop. Right. And I was like, no, it's not stopping. Food is, it's going to keep flowing, but it's going to flow in a different, flow in a different way.
And it's already disrupted.
Yeah.
It's significantly, not just because people who have coronavirus can't go to work, or there's issues with fulfillment. It's most of these farmers are used to putting groceries in the hands of restaurants.
Yep.
That's it. People are throwing away hundreds of thousands of pounds of produce right now because they can't get an outlet for it.
Yeah.
That's already happening. So you have the disruption on people not being able to participate in fulfilling the supply chain, but you also have the disruption on the source, the direct, restaurant consumer not being able to buy nearly the quantity that's there. So these are the kinds of things. This is exactly a great example, man, because it doesn't look like it's happening when you go to the grocery store, and it just looks like it's picked over to the extent that it's actually happening. So what we see is not necessarily exactly what's happening behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, there's big, huge impacts that are happening. Obviously, the import-export industry is hit super hard because there's so many embargoes on what we can do to try to prevent the spread of the virus. Right.
Well, in addition to that, the dollar being strong and a lot of other currencies becoming weaker is actually making trade difficult.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And it's we suspect that it's only gonna that gap between our currency and the other currencies is going to get larger.
Yeah, it's a good question. We'll get there, and the answer to that is yes. It very likely will. But there's a saying that, like, if things slow down in the US, things are absolutely bleeding in some of these foreign countries. And that's because people don't realize that over 70% of the United States GDPR is consumption. It's consumption. It's not creation. It's literally us consuming things. We can sustain a level of consumption that is so far and beyond any other country in the world. Most countries' GDPR, it's crazy, dude. Most countries' GDPR is based on manufacturing, right? It's based on exports of goods, of whatever it may be. Maybe it's oil, maybe it's steel. Maybe
give me some examples of consumption.
Let's see. Food, coffee, gas, clothing, big box retail.
This is where we're spending our money.
This is where we're spending our money, but we're also
this is what's creating. Yeah,
this unquenchable thirst to constantly be shopping, purchasing, consuming, and just acquiring, right? There's nothing like it, you know.
You're right. When we can travel again, if you don't know what Amateo is talking about, yeah, you go to some other countries. There's just not that much consumption happening.
No.
A lot of places, man, they don't even eat out that much, but they eat out, but they don't have a lot of stuff.
They don't have a lot of stuff. Most European countries, their homes are so much smaller. You don't have room to put all that shit. Yeah. And if you do eat, it's already sort of baked into the system of like where your cafes are and where you go meet with people. There's foreign countries that are just, their entire economies are built around Americans going there and consuming shit from them.
Yeah.
Right? Entire villages and cities and now they get tourism from other places, and that's definitely a part of it. But a huge percentage of it is Americans going there and consuming their goods and their wares. And there's some beauty to that because it sustains them. There's also some ugliness to that, right? Yeah. Obviously, we want things to be more fair trade. But so if the dollar is going up, right? Yes, it's putting a huge issue on these foreign countries. They're struggling really bad. I mean, the impact of tourism, I think that a really challenging thing for us right now is it's very easy to get caught up in the conspiracy. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong or that you shouldn't, but when there's so much noise, the conspiracy noise, the data noise, the news feed, the numbers, there's all this noise. Underneath it all, I think what a lot of us are feeling is so many people are just really struggling and suffering and worried. And it's really hard to digest that, to internalize it, to make sense of it. And I think underneath it all, we're in the collective field. There's a lot of that being expressed. Now, the issue that we have now is we've got the strong US dollar. We've got all of these assets de-risking into US dollar. We have US dollar causing pressure and strain on global trade. But what do we also have? We have the Fed printing. This is crazy, right?
By the way, we've never seen this before. Like the measures that are being taken they've never been tried in an economy like this.
Right.
The giving away money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw that they've already ran out of money for the payroll loan.
Yeah,
the PPP. And just
324 billion gone like that.
Just gone. And most people never will. The businesses that need that the most won't actually receive that. But anyway,
well, it's such top-down economics that by the time they opened it up for the self-employed and small business, the money was gone. Surprise. Yeah. I mean, and again, Kumo was talking about that today. He was like, if the federal government's recognizing the power that the states have to recognize their ability and the necessity for them to open and manage reopening up the economy, where is the state bailout? Why is the federal government bailing out corporations and Wall Street but not the states, with the money printer. So, by the time this thing is starting to again resume some sort of sense of abnormalcy, we're going to see over $7 trillion printed by the Fed. Right now, before this thing started, there was only $14 trillion in circulation. That's 50% increase of dollars in circulation on top of accumulating debt that's being registered, right? So what we're going to see very likely is the exponential growth of hyperinflation, where the dollar is not as starts to lose some of this value through dilution. Now, how fast is that going to happen? I don't know. Will they try to do measures to then pull these dollars out of circulation when it starts to happen to hedge it? Maybe. I don't know. Well, people probably didn't think they would knock the interest rate.
Well, that they were. I think we thought they were going to do that between 2008 and now, and they didn't do that.
They didn't do it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so going back to Bitcoin was never meant to be an alternative currency. Bitcoin was always intended to be a hyperinflation hedge. And that's why it's a timely conversation, is because Bitcoin, less than a month from now, is going through its next halving, meaning that its inflation rate is about to be cut in half. So,
the value of one Bitcoin will double. Is that right?
Not necessarily. The expense to mine one Bitcoin out of the system, the expense of that doubles.
Got it.
So, it's very expensive to mine a single Bitcoin. It's between $5,500 and $7,000, right? $7,500. Not a surprise that tends to be the fair market range of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. Not surprising. It stays pretty close to match the miners. That's what's interesting about Bitcoin. It's essentially a commodity where we translate energy into a store of value that has scarcity built in, right? There's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be minted. There's well over 1 million lost. There's 1 million locked up in Satoshi's wallet. And now the minting machine is going to be getting very, very minimal. Very, very minimal, less to go around. Now that could mean if it's super undervalued, maybe miners will crash the market and say, fuck this, we're not making enough money. Who knows? Historically though, the scarcity relationship to Bitcoin and then correlating to hyperinflation has led it to go up in these big like logarithmic jumps. And I don't think this time will be any different. We've all been wanting that $50,000 Bitcoin or $100,000 Bitcoin. And I'm not a Bitcoin whale. I've just accumulated a little bit. I was very late to the party. I've accumulated a little bit, but I'm not like some big whale, whatever. I love the technology. I love what it represents. And I can get more into my personal relationship to why I got involved with the industry. But we've all been rooting for that number. We all knew that it was a hedge to hyperinflation, but now it's real.
Yeah.
Now it's real. Now it's going to be worth $50,000 or $100,000, in part because there's way more dollars out there,
right?
And in part because some of those dollars are worth less. Now, does that mean 50 or 100 grand's not going to be a lot of money? No, it definitely still will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people rewind. I remember it was 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago this month. I was asked to go speak on a panel at Paleo FX, which is a health and fitness thing, but they're really big on culture as well. Where did we come from? Where are we going? It was part of the conversation. And then they put me on a panel where they wanted me to discuss crypto. And I was like, man, I've always been just this person that's watching it because I like economics and I like to geek out about it. I was like, well, if I'm going to be put on a panel about this, I might as well do some research.
Right.
And I started doing the research and I realized that there was so much what I noticed is there was a huge increase in interest, and that it was trending. It was trending as search terms and all this stuff. And I go, well, this is obviously about to blow up.
Right.
So I started buying. So I was asked to be on a panel, which caused me to buy a bunch of. I bought a few different currencies, and I just watched that hockey stick happen.
Yeah.
Remember? I know you remember.
Oh yeah, we entered the exact same time.
Yeah.
Exact same time.
Yeah, yeah. Because when you were saying, "Oh yeah, I was a late adopter," I was like, "Yeah, I was too."
Yeah.
And I got in, and I bought, and I bought, and I bought all year long, and then December hit, and my brother got in. And when my brother started buying, that's when I knew. That's when I knew it was time to get out. So
we all had our indicators, you know?
Yeah. So I got out, and then sure enough, the whole market did its thing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is
my uncle called me to buy Ripple, and that's when I knew.
That's when you know.
I hadn't heard from him in fucking years, you know?
Yeah. You're like, oh.
I was like, I gotta sell.
Yeah. Identify who that person is that best resembles the median, the average. And when they start buying, that's when you gotta go.
Yeah.
So I understood what it was. Well, I think I understand what it is. I thought I understood what it was. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's an alternative for when the dollar takes a shit.
Yeah, exactly, like Bitcoin is, right? But there's obviously now so many other currencies that have different purposes. This is the litmus test. This is if it's gonna shine now's the time. It's either if this is make or break for Bitcoin. And if it's a break for Bitcoin, it means that the whole crypto economy is going to take a lot longer to manifest and fulfill its potential. It really is the litmus test, because this is what it was designed for. It was born out of the financial crisis of 2008. It's not that old. This is going to be the first major financial crisis that it's seen. And what has happened thus far is it rebounded faster. The thing about crypto and Bitcoin is so interesting is its market cycles are always hyper accelerated, right? So like, I think there was like a 5 or 7 year consolidation cycle on gold. Bitcoin was able to do that in 2 years, right? It's everything is accelerated, and that's why people love to trade it. We've got these hyper fast minds these days with technology, this quick dopamine hit, now, given the stock market has been as volatile, if not more, than the crypto market these days. So for the first time ever, it's a crazy situation. I don't know how long that'll last, maybe for a while, but there's definitely this effect. Now, at the end of the day, we have a lot of questions about how our trust in the US government is under question, big time. It maybe more than ever. How this whole thing has been handled, what decisions were made, how this money is being managed, what we're getting out of it. And some people really agree with how it's been managed. They're all for it. But there's a lot of people questioning and wondering what's up. We all know that there has to be intermediaries, or we have to have a solution without intermediaries, right? Like when this whole thing first started happening, the banks started putting cash withdrawal limits on people. They said, you can't withdraw more than this amount of dollars. Well, that's an issue.
Well,
and then
isn't that illegal?
No, it's not in a time of crisis.
Okay, I was under the impression that if you have dollars in the bank, they have to give them to you.
No. Oh no. Oh no. We call those bank runs. That's what happened in the Great Depression, right?
Yeah.
And as a part of this, the Fed or the government said that banks have to have a 0% amount of your money in the bank, in the coffers. So it's a 0% funding rate, meaning that for every $1,000 you put in the bank, they can lend out 100% of it and keep zero. So what I think is about to happen is I think the dollar's going to maintain strength. This is my crackpot prediction of like not being an economist, but like loving trends and going deep, right?
Well, here's the
Well, I
thing
think-
is even the people who've been studying economics their whole lives and they're 50, 60 years old are going, I don't know.
right? Yeah, of
Here-
course.
Here's
And
a
I don't know
here's a
either.
guess. I'm gonna throw the dart at the board.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so this is my dart on the board, right? My dart on the board is the US dollar is going to maintain strength. We're going to start, hyperinflation is going to start kicking in. People are going to keep looking for alternatives. Like I said, it's going to be harder and harder to get gold and silver. There's scarcity driven into that. Gold's entering a huge bull market, probably going to see another 50% increase on gold. Governments and institutions around the world are stockpiling it, and can't have mine. What? Like, get out of here. It's like,
yeah.
and so then all of a sudden it's going to be like, even with the virus, you not only could you not get all of your money out of the bank, but even if you tried to use your actual dollars, most places wouldn't take them because they're afraid of contamination. So dollars are dirty. So okay, now I can't even have my dollars out of the bank if I want them. They're loosening up some of these restrictions, and part of it was like toilet paper. There's only so much that they have on hand. It's a little bit of that, like it's a little bit like that. So a lot of them are catching up. But all of a sudden you have these dollars that physically people don't want to touch or take. Well, that's a problem. We now already have a little bit of a crack in the belief system of the value of the paper. Okay, well, don't worry. Digital, use your cards, use your stuff. Well, okay, we're already digital. But now what happens is everyone's out of work. There's so much employment.
Well, I heard a rumor there was a digital coin that the government was going to come out with. I heard something. I go, well,
Yeah.
Don't we already have that? Like, I don't think we're actually printing off that many dollars. I think we're just adding zeros.
We're definitely adding zeros.
Yeah.
The money printer physically does some stuff, but we're mostly just adding zeros, right? We're just injecting the digital. We're adding zeros to the bank. But I think we're going to get into a really bad debt crisis because they're going to have to keep on. They're going to run into limits on how much they can just print and give out freely due to hyperinflation. So then they're going to say, look, you got to lend it. And then they're going to open up, make personal loans. I mean, obviously people are refinancing, interest rates are so low. Small businesses, personal loans.
Oh, there's a great time to get a loan.
Great time to get a loan.
Yeah.
But what happens when all of a sudden we all have all of these loans? We start to get into another big issue. What happens when all these people start defaulting on all their loans? I think the real economic impact of what's happened in the last few months, we're not going to see for 5 to 10 years. It's not going to be next month. It's going to be 5 or 10 years where all of this stuff starts catching up with us. And maybe we have other pandemics or, COVID-19 round 2. I don't know. It's really crazy. It's like with real estate, with people not paying their rents and defaulting on mortgages, it seems like a lot of properties will come to the market. But if dollars start to hyperinflate, how much are those properties going to lose their value? Probably some, but then they may rebound. It may not be the 50% slash in prices that a lot of people hope for or don't hope for, or really scared for, right? Depending on which side are you on, a buyer or seller.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the 50% slash.
Me too. I want to buy it all up, dude.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, we'll see, man. It's interesting. Yeah, the more smart people I talk to, people who watch the economy, or they're running companies that are doing 8, 9 figures, people who actually know what it means for that much money to flow. Because the average person working like a 9 to 5 or a small business owner, I mean, I'm included in this, don't really, like when I start talking to people who are managing much larger sums of money, I'm like, I get lost. I go, I don't know.
Yeah,
sure.
that,
but when I talk to these people who understand the global markets better and the national market and all this, there's a lot of what I'm hearing is Well, we've seen this before, and we've seen this before, and we've seen this before, but we've never seen all of this happen at the same time.
Totally.
So it's a big mystery, and like what you're talking about here is we may, a lot of signs are pointing to a depressed housing market, but maybe not. Maybe not,
Right.
because of some other pieces. I mean,
Well,
we're
like
looking at. I mean, how
they're
many
just
people are renting
propping
out?
things up.
How many people are renting out Airbnbs right now?
Right.
I actually, I pretty much live out of Airbnbs, and the last couple of years, and
I had my couple years of that too.
yeah, and it's great. And I was talking to someone who owns 15. I was renting one of her spots, so I got 15 of these, and there's in a small town that's mostly fueled by tourism.
Right.
And this is in the US. And it's like I'm looking at this and I go, I wonder, I doubt she owns all 15 properties outright. She probably owes on all of them. And now nobody's renting them out. How many Airbnbs are there mortgages on? I'd say, if I had to guess, it's 95% or more probably do.
Oh yeah,
and so all those homes are going to open up. So now you've got on the supply side, you have just the Airbnb alone.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I'm aware of because I'm a customer of that. How many other things like that are floating around where, homes just aren't being used. And so you go
office buildings.
Go to a place like Vegas and they got so many empty homes.
Right.
Like big mansions, just nobody's in them.
Yeah. And like, if we have to respect social distancing measures for a year, what happens to all these office buildings no one can go back into?
Yeah.
That's a bizarre market,
Well, I mean, some of what people have been talking about is companies are going to realize that people don't have to be in the office.
Oh, 100%.
They're going to see
anyone
how
who
much
can
money,
remote will go.
Yeah. And how much money are they going to save on not having to pay for office space?
Right.
And so somebody was saying, maybe it was Michael Rostowski, I was talking to him, possibly like some of these office spaces may be turned into a housing, like really low income housing.
Yeah.
I
just wish that, I guess my philanthropist and optimist heart just wish that they with this whole bailout or, the stimulus, it's like, use this and just solve the homeless crisis for good. With the amount of money it would have cost to solve the homeless crisis for the next 5 years, it would have been fine print, like literally in the dollar figures that they're talking about in trillions of dollars, which is impossible to comprehend. Because you're right, like office buildings, homes, there's all this opportunity for low income housing. And there's also opportunities to just like give people homes, and get them off the streets. But
a large part of the homeless issue is a mental health issue.
Of course.
It's not really a money issue.
But there's not always available solutions,
Well, I mean, there could be mental health solutions for the homeless. I mean, that could be part of it. It's like, there's rehabilitation.
That's the challenge. You can't just provide them homes without providing them medical services of a wide variety, right? Like mental health, physical health, the whole thing. That's all got to be baked into it.
Yeah. What are you worried about the virus?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like for myself.
Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, like I'm fairly healthy guy. I take really good care of myself. I eat really clean. I've been boosting my immune system, but I think the thing that's freaky is just I am and I'm not, right? Because like I've seen really healthy people, athletes, whatever, get rocked. And I've seen other people who aren't as healthy be okay. Like I don't have diabetes. I'm not overweight. Like, I'm a little chubby, but like I got a couple pounds. But I'm not overweight. I'm not obese. I do get allergy-oriented asthma, so that freaks me out.
Yeah.
It's been like really blooming here in Austin. I've been on the trails. It's my first year here during like a spring, summer season.
Yeah.
So sometimes my allergies go crazy and my chest gets tight, and like that's scary, dude. Cause then I'm like, oh man, if I get the virus, I got allergies, like that's a bad mix. What happens there? I mean, I wear a mask. I do all the right things. I mean, this isn't a pat on my back, but I did see this coming pretty early. So I started buying like hydrogen peroxide, Clorox wipes, all that stuff in January when I first got here, because I just had a feeling that it was gonna, thanks to following people who were following trends and watching the breakout in China, gave me a little bit of foresight.
Yeah.
Wasn't like, and then of course I intuitively tuned in and I knew something big was coming out. It's like a virus. And I was like, really, is it this? And I'm like, well, how do you prepare for that? Something like that. And I was like, oh, I guess I got to get these things like cleaning supplies. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you scared of the virus?
No, it was about a week ago. I was following everything. I was looking at the stats. I started following this guy on YouTube, where he does a good job of, he seems pretty objective, but I mean, everyone's got a sensational slant
for sure
on the presentation of data. But I started like really looking at the data, and I started, and the thing is like, man, everyone's freaking out about this, but I don't know anyone personally that's gotten it. And I started, and I understand the power of story and narrative and culture and media and all that stuff. And I've witnessed things firsthand that were reported later, and I'm going, this is not what it seems. And I started seeing a lot of fake news.
Yeah.
And I started looking, I go, okay, let's look at the data. And then I realized that a lot of the death count that we're seeing is not necessarily, the way we're accounting for death is being done differently than it has in the past. So the government started dictating to the medical community on how they report deaths and what is attributed to COVID-19 and what's
pre-existing conditions, et cetera.
Yeah. And so basically what I realized is that even if you died of something else, if you happen to have COVID-19, they're attributing it to COVID-19.
Right.
And then the stat came out, I think it was about a week ago, 86% of deaths, there was comorbidity that was associated.
Right.
And then I look at what the medical community considers comorbidity, and I go, wow, it's a really, you pretty much have to have been labeled with a disease. But how many people do I notice are sick that would say that they don't have a disease and they're healthy? Okay. It's like, okay. So I'm looking at it, I go, you know what? I'm actually not worried about it for me. I probably was already exposed. And
I felt that too, that I had been exposed.
Man,
I
travel international, and I'm on the West Coast, like where there's a lot of interactions happening. And so going back to intuition, like we were saying, is about a week ago, maybe a little bit longer, maybe 10 days now, I go, oh, you got me. Like I had that feeling of being gotten, like I just gotten punked.
Right.
I was like, oh, like I actually was concerned, like, oh, you got me. And a large part of my concern is for society as a whole. Is like, yeah, are we going to run out of equipment, respirators, like all these things, which I still like, I don't know how accurate everything is. I do know people working in a hospital where it's a conversation. They're having to say these people don't get them and these people do.
Yeah.
But then I'm also witnessing some things come out saying we don't need respirators. There's other ways of getting people to breathe well that doesn't involve this piece of equipment. There's an over reliance on one method.
Right.
And so, but I'm looking at it, I go, oh, well, you got me. Is the experience that I was having. And so my mind definitely shifted more into like, I mean, I was already doing a lot of not new things, but I started stacking things to boost my immunity. It's like, okay, I do cold showers, I do breath work, I do combo, I do hop I do I drink my Grange drink. I take, you know, my medicinal mushrooms. I do all these things that are really a lot of immune boosting things. I take probiotics when I travel, but not when I'm home. So what I did is I just bought everything that would boost my immune system. I started taking it all at the same time. I fast every Saturday. I do a 36-hour fast. I do combo afterwards. And then every single morning is breath work. And so it's like, I just increased the frequency of all the things that I was already doing to make me healthy. And I was just like, you know what? If this virus, you could inject it in my vein, I'll fuck it up. You know, that's just going more on having a much more offensive mindset around it
rather than defensive.
And the other thing is like, we've isolated ourselves. And so this possibility of passing it on to somebody who is at risk, it just doesn't exist. We've got 3 young people in a house and we don't interact much outside of what's happening right now, this electronic interaction. So I'm personally not that concerned about it. And there's some really smart people out there that are presenting different solutions than what we're using right now, that make a lot more sense than what I'm hearing through like mainstream media. So mainstream media has lost, like, I already wasn't paying attention to it.
For sure.
But some of the shit that I'm looking at is it's disgusting. It's really, really disgusting.
Yeah, I like to have a little bit of my hand on the pulse of mainstream. I like to get a lot of alternative, especially with all this stuff going on. I'm curious on how things are being handled, more so than I am believing. I think this thing was a big unknown, and it was clear that they overestimated the impact, like, so egregiously, like, so bad. At the same time, like, I don't know, like, I don't think we made the wrong decision to go into quarantine.
No, I don't think so. There was somebody I was watching. He said something that I thought was something to lock away and keep in mind is if we handle it well, it will seem like we overreacted.
Exactly.
And if we don't handle it well enough, it'll seem like we underreacted.
Yep.
And so what we have is because it's not as egregious as they were saying it was going to be, a lot of people are feeling as though it was an overreaction.
That's right. Which is a natural reaction to it, right? I mean, that 100%. And I think we're going to learn a lot about how we test the waters and re-enter things and restart things. I don't think there's any right answers. There's just going to be a lot of experiments because we don't know.
Yeah.
And it's always tough because I do know some people who've had it personally, not in my own family. I do know some people who really struggled with it. It was really bad. Some people's family members who died and said the whole thing was really awful, and that shit's tough. We want to, of course, like, mitigate all of that. I mean, I think that some of the things were done right, and I think we have to get really smart about how we get life back to abnormalcy. But I can guarantee that people are not necessarily used to going out to restaurants, sitting far away from everyone, and everyone wearing masks and only taking them off to eat their food. Or
it just seems like I'm not wearing a mask to a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean,
it seems silly.
Maybe they won't let you in. Like, we'll see. It seems very. Well,
what I'm saying is, like, I'm taking food from out in the environment and sticking it in my mouth. Like, I don't know if there's a mask is actually going to help.
Of course, I don't even know if restaurants are going to mandate that.
This is my concern. So this is my concern is what people are doing now is they're citing there was the military is like war games, right? Simulations. They simulate, if someone sends a missile to whatever, how do we respond? And so there was a simulation run a while back about a virus just like this. There was a simulation ran a number of years ago, and
about that.
And the result was like, we failed the test, right? Is what the simulation said. And it was like, we need to do all these things.
Interesting.
And so this was presented to, of course, everyone wants to blame Trump administration for this, which is easy to do. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, they tried to bring it to the Trump administration, but they fired the person that would have like brought it in and all this stuff, right? And so everyone, this is a 2020 hindsight deal. People are going, should have fucking listened. I'm like, how many simulations for different scenarios were brought? Was that one of 30,000 simulations? And now we can look back and go, we should have listened. So what are we going to do? Fucking nerf the world? Are we going to run simulations for every possible threat and then just try? Next thing you know, everyone's just living through virtual reality, right? And so like, don't leave your house. It's not fucking safe out there. So my big concern is now they're going to start running simulations for all sorts of things. I mean, if we kept it just a disease, it is scary. And so now there's this hyper vigilance around viruses specifically. And now you have people over sanitizing things, which causes super bugs. That's going to cause people they're so focused on viruses, they don't know what's happening with bacteria right now.
Right.
Is we're over sanitizing so much that we're killing all the bacteria, which is actually leaving room for we're killing good bacteria. We're killing other bacteria. And we're
forcing them to change to survive.
They're evolving. And so now there's going to be some type of bacterial infection. And the thing is, the average person doesn't understand how it all works together. Like whole systems thinking and theory is lost on most people. And so we have a lot of people with opinions that don't know how to think in a whole systems way. And those people should not be making decisions for things outside of themselves. Right. Like, make decisions for you. Thank you. And then there's some adults over there who can think more globally. And I normally don't say shit like that, but I'm like, look, when I talk to people, I go, you don't belong in the conversation. And there's conversations I don't belong in. I'm not saying I'm the one.
100%.
What I'm saying is like, there are much smarter people than me that can consider way more factors than I can consider.
Yeah.
But
this is the same thing around like we started the conversation about your intuition can be proven wrong by data. Data can be proven wrong by reality. Because nature is like one big like surprise, bitch. You think you can run these simulations with the most powerful computers in the world and be wrong every time because nature is just that clever. It's that emergent. And it's also, as you were saying, it's that holistically systemic because nature has this way of all these interacting parts taking into account one another with these emergent properties. But yet it's very difficult for us to encapsulate that. I think one of the, it's very concerning what's going on with our civil liberties. They released something else that they thought they were going to monitor pandemic and corona stuff through surveillance. How is surveillance? Did it work in China? The surveillance is crazy.
Well, they're saying it does. That's the thing is, if you listen to one person, they're saying that Korea, or was it South Korea and China, they were able to track everything and lock it down. And that's why they were successful. We should do the same thing. And then you have other people going, well, they're not even like that. That government is not even reporting actual numbers. Like they had new cases one day in the middle.
They readjusted the numbers by 50% in deaths yesterday. And they said that that was yesterday. They said 50% more deaths. And they're like, you're still underreporting by about 40,000 or something. Right.
Yeah.
So, if it worked that well, why did it escape and affect the world? At the same time, sure, maybe surveillance worked, but so did driving trucks down the street with cannons of disinfectant. You know what I mean? Like that shit apparently worked too, and that's ridiculous. You know, like I mean, I think like, will surveillance have some benefit? Sure. I mean, this is where it gets into sense making, right? You
Right.
can't at this time evaluate something as good and bad, right or wrong, or yes, that's a solution or no. But we have to evaluate everything, just like a virus, just like a treatment, as a spectrum of variables, some of which may be positive, neutral, or negative. And we have to sit back and assess from a bigger perspective this huge amount of variability, right? Like with this coronavirus, what's called into question is vaccines, not just vaccines for the COVID-19, but just in general. And it's like, and I'm not saying where my like, and it's not for me about not having a backbone on where I stand on matters. To me, if I look at the equation of vaccines, has there been a positive impact? Yes. Has there been systemic side effects which are negative? Absolutely. Do you then have to, and do we need to protect the right to have the choice? For sure. But do we also have to get really smart in how we account for people who want to exercise the opt out? We do. In case, you know, there's something else that pops up, like if the H1N1 came up and it was a 50%, you know, mortality rate, whatever. But, you know, I think that those things are really difficult. Like, we're probably all really happy without realizing it that our children aren't going to have smallpox, right?
Yeah.
But does that mean your kid has to have a smallpox vaccine? We're able to contain the majority of it through these initiatives. And so I think, like, as we assess all of this stuff, you really have to, you know, it doesn't mean you have to scour for all the information you can get and lose yourself in that. I think you have to really find what's right in terms of what information you want to get. Make sure you're not living in your own confirmation bias. Be willing to be wrong, be willing to have different perspectives, and then just set everything out and sort of step back and evaluate it, and then understand, you know, I don't know how much it is about rallying around your own, like, belief system, where does it boil down back to the personal choice you'll have to make?
Yeah. Well,
right.
I think it does come down to belief system and like philosophy. I think this is gonna cause people to sit back and become more philosophical, because
I agree with that.
This is bigger. It's like for me, I did a check-in. It's like, imagine, I don't think this is gonna happen, but imagine it's a mandatory vaccine.
Right.
Let's just say it's a mandatory vaccine if you want to fly. So you're going to have to like have this badge to fly, and it's going to include this vaccine. Do I stop flying? That's what I asked myself. And I said, yeah,
right.
I'm not going to, I haven't received a vaccine since I left the Navy.
Right.
And it was required there. But even when I was receiving them there, I was like, I trust my body more than I trust a vaccine. Right. So, and that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to vaccines across the board. I mean, I may receive one in the future. I don't think there's anything wrong with them, really. Just like anything, they have potential negative side effects, and there's evidence for that, you know. Lots of evidence, actually.
Yeah. And I think it's tricky when you have evidence that this could be a lab created biovirus, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're creating a lab created vaccine to handle a lab created biovirus. Like, you know, at first that was really dispelled, that this was a wet market thing. And then the New York Post, just like a couple of days ago, said have evidence, we're launching this big investigation to the fact that there's a lot, who knows? I don't know. But if that is the case,
I think that would be beneficial to the Trump administration for it to be a weapon. So again, this is where I don't trust the media, is the New York Post, huh? Oh, the New York Post is saying this potentially, it's like, maybe.
Yeah. And when I reference that, I mean, like, it's something that was signed off, but now is being picked up as a theory that's being ran, right? It's not necessarily, I believe the New York Post. It's that, wow, the New York Post is now adopting this theory and starting to run with it. that's fascinating.
Yeah, I always wonder, like when I see something like that, is who's benefiting from this
100%.
being the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, I do think
I don't want people to be hyper focused on the vaccine. Like one of the issues I see right now is people are hyper focused on the vaccine as the solution.
Right.
Oh, if we just had a vaccine, it's like, not necessarily. One, every other, like even polio, people argue with me on the internet and stuff with, which is funny because when people start arguing with me on Instagram, it usually turns into like, yeah, exactly, we're agreeing. You just
right, of course.
Like people, I think a lot of times people, we tend to categorize people as soon as we read something they write. They think I'm an anti-vaxxer or something like that.
Right.
And when I'm like, no. What I want to pull people's attention to is the vaccine is not the solution. There's not, our culture, the one of the major issues we have with our culture right now is that we outsource the responsibility of our health. And we go, oh, the doctor will write me a prescription that will solve that problem. Oh, I know I can take better care of myself, but I know that medicine is making progress. Or, anytime anyone is like really pro-vaccine, I immediately zoom out and I go, how do they think about health? And then I realize that the people who are very pro-vaccine actually don't understand health that well.
To a degree. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who are very pro-vaccine who spend a lot of time in third world countries.
Yeah.
And
what I'm questioning is how much are they pinning on that? Is it 10% acceptable? I put 10% there, but it's not 100% solution.
Yeah, vaccines are always difficult because it always feels like the Australia thing where it's like you've got a frog problem that's an invasive species, so you let out a snake, and then the snake becomes an invasive species, and you have to let out a mongoose, and then you got all these people trying to hunt fucking mongooses, and they're out there getting bit by snakes. You know what I mean? Like it's like it's this real weird thing where it's like, oh, you got this thing, let's release this to try, and then you got this mutation. There's a lot of like fear.
It's an ecosystem.
It's an ecosystem, and it's this hyper response to this ecosystem of this rush. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to do this. That creates so many problems later. And I think you're right. We have the beautiful thing about quarantine is we have the time. Some of us are quite busy, including myself. I've been very busy with work. Things haven't slowed down for me, but we still have the time to step back and look at things and do this like philosophizing, sense making with the time, evaluating all of these things, right? Yeah. And again, like, you're right, it does come down to beliefs, but you also boil down the vaccine conversation to your own personal decision. Yeah. And that personal decision is not even happening now. It's very future paced, right? That's assuming that they could actually generate the resources to have that many vaccines available within a certain time frame where it's even still relevant, right? Like, oh, okay, now they have 200 million vaccines. What's the status of the coronavirus? Is it still a systemic threat? Right?
No, it's like, it could be like everyone's got herd immunity and it's not a big deal. And oh, by the way, there's this other virus now we should all be freaking out about.
That's right. I think we have to be really careful not investing so much energy into future paced things that we have to take step by step, and we could be using that like creatively, because right now there is an opportunity for people to collaborate and build resource networks of both governance, decision making, communication. Every time we have these big constrictions on resources, on a disruption in how we use our time, a disruption in how we do things, we always tend to see a novelty emergence, right? It's a suppression. Everything is being suppressed, and this pressure's building, and it's not letting up. And then we have the employment issues, and then we have the health issues, and we have both optimism and fear, and it's boiling. Underneath all of that, there's certain people who are going, we have to do things differently. And here's my solution. And here's how I want to work with others to build that solution. And it starts to grow, right? Like in cymatics, you can never reach the next octave of frequency until you move through a layer of greater and greater chaos, right? You have complexity, you have chaos, and then you have a greater form of complexity. The greater form of complexity is always on the other side of a greater level of chaos. And that seems to be how things work in nature. So it's no surprise that we're being handed a greater level of chaos that we need to respond to with a much heightened level of mature, wise, sensible, sense-making complexity. And that is, I think, we're going to see some amazing stuff on the other side of this. Maybe it'll take a few years because that's how the exponential trend will start. But it's going to be very fascinating because, you know, I hate to say it, but there's a part of the way that this has been handled at the top-down economic side where it feels like there's just this like greedy siphon that just wants to everything it can until it sucks everything out of everybody's pockets and it's like, I have it all. And then it goes, well, all that shit you have doesn't have value to us anymore. And then it's like, fuck, you know, and then it's like, and what do we have? We have something new to replace it, but it has to get strained. The uncomfortability has to get greater. The revolution is not going to happen through comfort, through people being able to just have things go easy. It's going to happen through a forced multiplier of pressure and suffering and severity that's going to create the absolute necessity. You know, I had a bunch of people who write me and said, you know, this is the proof that the new world order is taking over. And I said, I don't get that because all of our borders are closed to each other and no countries are like even, we can't even travel and the states are at odds with the government. I don't know. Maybe what we're actually seeing is the inability for these top-down structures to actually adequately take care of what's underneath, and the lower, more localized ecosystems realizing the power that they do have to make decisions and choices, the power that cannot be enforced. Like, sure, you know what? There was tanks on the streets in certain places, but there was also entire states and cities that never closed down throughout this.
Yeah. Where I'm at in Utah is not that. I mean, if I wear a mask out, I'm the weirdo.
Right.
So, and I think Utah's got the fewest cases out of every state. And so, I mean, everybody's different. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
Like that's, you know, every state's different. Every region's going to be different. Maybe it just doesn't do well in the desert. I don't fucking know.
In Austin, there's a lot of people wearing masks, but there's also a lot of people like, this is Texas, motherfucker. Like, you can keep me out in my house and you can see it. You know, you see people pull up in their trucks to a light and they're looking around like I'm outside. What are you going to do about it? You know? and everybody's like, nothing. Like,
nothing.
What you got to do? Because we ain't like, I think that sort of personal power and empowerment is becoming a little bit more realized. You know, it's like, okay, the government is so off on these numbers, and now they're going to figure out a way to give every single person a bio vaccine with computer chips. You like that's a huge logistical effort. Like you give them a lot of credit that maybe they could pull it off. Maybe they could, and I could be completely wrong. But that logistical effort, when there's such a fucking mess, is really hard to consider would be even possible.
Yeah. A lot of things that people are afraid of that they couldn't pull off.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he's like, I'm afraid they're gonna chip us all. I'm like, okay, good luck with that.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. I think there's gonna be I'm in the field of health, so I'm obviously looking closer at like food supply chains, things like that, because I like you have to heal and nurture the body. That's just what has to happen. And when I look at food and what I'm talking with other people who are in the same field is, there's gonna be a disruption. Everything's gonna become much more local, and what we have is one of the biggest pork factories.
The big plant.
Yeah, it fucking shut down, and I'm hanging out with these, I'm hanging out here in Utah. I'm talking to people in the ranching industry. And so I'm finding out, I'm going, oh shit, they can process like 1 cow a day in this region. That's maybe 2. That's how many like the butcher's able to do here. I'm going, how's this possible? What are we talking about? It's like, oh, what they normally do is when a calf is a year old, they take it to the auction and it's sold as a commodity, whatever, however many dollars per pound, and then they put on a trailer, and it gets shipped to the East Coast to be slaughtered. So they shipped the cow from Utah to a facility that's hundreds, maybe thousands of miles away to fatten it up first, because they spend 6 to 9 months. They make sure they're loaded with steroids.
Corn feed finish.
So they're feeding them poison. So because they got poison in them, that makes them bigger, which allows them to sell for more. They use antibiotics and steroids to keep them alive, just long enough to slaughter them. That's not the animal I want to eat, by the way.
Right.
And so
100%.
these big companies, these big meat companies, this is how they're doing it. This is the majority of the meat in the United States. This is how it's going. And it's centralized. So the cows are being born and raised all over, but they're going through this bottleneck. They're going through this really small chute of, it has to go to this one processing plant before it makes it to your plate. And so and I started asking questions, because I was like, well, why don't we, because now we're talking about, I'm helping a friend, like, we start a grass-fed beef local company, and they can shoot out 5,000 to 8,000 a year cows, but they can only process 1 a day here. So it's like, there's massive opportunity, like what we were talking about is, there needs to be a butchering facility in the Southwest that can manage that, and then the distribution of the meat, instead of what's going on now. And I'm sure there's some distribution stuff I'm not familiar with, but that one pork facility, between the restaurants not ordering, a facility getting shut down, these are major disruptions. And it's not like we can just pop up a new processing facility overnight.
Oh yeah, and have it be certified and accredited, because it's very difficult to. That's a big challenging part. Is they centralize the ability to get accredited to actually process that many animals, that forces them into these centralized factory situations, right? It goes without saying, and it kind of brings us even back full circle to the crypto and blockchain thing. What is crypto and blockchain? What is Bitcoin? It's a decentralized infrastructure. Bitcoin is the most powerful distributed computer in the world by far, because there's thousands of nodes contributing to the network. There's nodes in space. So if you completely annihilated the entire network on Earth, it would still work. I can still send you Bitcoin, just take a long time, right? Like it's crazy how decentralized it is. And there will be people who are contributing to that decentralized network, even if it's not profitable, just as to the system, right? They're like they don't care. They just want to keep it running. It's an anarchist thing.
For sure.
For sure. So what we have here is we have this move towards decentralization and distribution of resources, of energy, power, of food. And it's a forced, it was starting to happen, but it's not going to happen fast enough to sustain the change that we have to experience to actually remediate the way that we are just draining the planet of resources at such a critical rate, which is just so tragic, right? Like the planet was like, from a meta perspective, whatever, it does feel like there was a level that the planet was like, okay, humans, like let me humble you for a second. One, you're going to take a break. You're going to take a break. We're going to give these roads a break. We're going to give the manufacturings a break. We're going to give the oceans a break. you're going to take a break. You're going to think about what you did, and you're going to figure out how you could do it better. And if you don't figure out how you can do it better, you're going to get sick and you're going to die. And I think that that's the situation that we're in, and for the better, you know. But I have to wrap up. I got a meeting.
Yeah,
I
man.
gotta jump to.
All right. Where do people need to go?
Right now, I mean, mostly just check out the company, right? Like, I mostly focus on building that. Investvoyager.com. It's an awesome crypto app. I can even after this, I'll get you set up with a promo code that you can use. Promo code Bledsoe. Give me a few minutes, and you'll get $25 in Bitcoin for signing up when you make your first trade of $100. And so will Bledsoe. So you get Bledsoe some Bitcoin. How about that? That's awesome.
I love it. I want it. Yeah, thank you.
Of course, I'm gonna get you set up. But visit that out. Feel free to follow me on social and check it out. Obviously, we're just two guys trying to make sense of everything going on. I hope everyone who tuned in enjoyed just doing our best to figure things out in the way that matters to us right now. So, you know, appreciate everybody tuning in.
I was entertained. I hope others were entertained.
Likewise.
We love it.
Likewise. We'll get into goofy, geeky, more far out there shit another time. I know that this is a little bit heavy and dense, but I think the time's called for it. So.
Next time, aliens.
Let's do it.
All right. Love you, brother.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Love you too. Bye.